Molecular compounds, ionic compounds, covalent bonds, and ionic bonds. Some important terms to know first. Ion, a positively or negatively charged atom or molecule, not neutral. Chemical bond, a chemical link between two atoms which holds the atoms together. Ionic bond, a chemical bond that forms between oppositely charged ions. Ionic compound, a compound made of oppositely charged ions. Molecule, the smallest discrete particle of the pure substance which has one or more shared electrons. What is a molecular compound? A molecular compound forms when the atoms of two or more different elements share electrons. An example of a molecular compound is H2O, two hydrogen atoms plus one oxygen atom. What is a covalent bond? A chemical bond in which one or more pairs of electrons are shared by two atoms. In a covalent bond, the shared electrons are attracted to the nuclei of both atoms. The attraction of the nuclei for the shared electrons holds the atoms together. Unlike ionic compounds, the electrons are not transferred between atoms, and the atoms remain uncharged. A covalent bond is like a game of tug-of-war. The mutual pull of the two teams on the shared rope is an analogy for the attraction of the two atoms on the electrons that are shared in a covalent bond. A water molecule has two covalent bonds. More examples. Nitrogen oxide. This is a molecular compound because nitrogen and oxygen are two different elements. The molecule has formed one covalent bond. Hydrogen. This is not a molecular compound because the two atoms sharing electrons are of the same element. It can be referred to as a molecule, but not a compound because it is only made of one element. This is a covalent bond because there is one pair of electrons being shared by two atoms. The charge is and kind of element is irrelevant. Sodium chloride. This is a compound because it is made of more than one kind of element, sodium and chlorine, but it is not a molecule because the bond that holds sodium chloride together is an ionic bond. This makes sodium chloride an ionic compound. This does not have a covalent bond because there is a transfer of electrons and charge of the atoms is opposite. The sodium is positive while the chlorine is negative after the transfer of electrons, making it an ionic bond. Ionic bonds versus covalent bonds. Ionic bonds and covalent bonds might seem to be very similar, but they are actually quite different. In an ionic bond, there is a transfer of electrons creating an electric link, whereas in a covalent bond, the atoms share a pair of electrons and are physically linked. Here is an example with some of the molecules we've reviewed already. Let us first look at the ionic bond of sodium chloride. The electron moves from sodium to chlorine. The positively charged sodium and negatively charged chlorine attract each other and are electronically bonded together. Notice how the outer shells are not attached, unlike our covalent bond of hydrogen gas or H2. The electrons cannot move independently, so the atoms form bonds by sharing electrons and therefore stabilizing the gas. Notice how in these crystal lattice diagrams, the ionic solids atoms are not intermolecularly bonded the way the molecular solid is. You can tell the bonding is different because diagram B uses ball and stick models to show the molecular bonds.
Clarifications. All of our examples were chemical bonds because there was a link between all of the atoms holding them together, which created a molecule. Each of our examples were a molecule, yet they were different types of molecules, ionic or molecular. Let's explore in more detail. Stay tuned.